In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create both of these carton animations using the volume builder, so you'll need version R20 or above to do this. I'll take you through the whole process, modelling and animating the milk carton using the volume builder, and then lighting and texturing with Octane. We'll then adapt the model, animation and Octane materials to create the glass orange juice version. As I posted these to Instagram, Elliott took on the challenge of creating this effect in Blender, and FXPear did the same for 3D Studio Max, so check out their channels to see how they tackled it. Links are in the description below. Let me know in the comments below if there are any other posts of mine you'd like a tutorial on, and please remember to like and subscribe and you'll get notifications of when I upload new videos. Okay, let's get started. Right, let's just start off with a standard cube, and I'm going to make that editable. And then I'm going to select the top polygon and bring this up about 110 in the Y. And then what I want to do is, with that still selected, I'm going to pick the loop path cut tool. I've got a shortcut here, but if you want to find it, it's under Mesh, Create Tools. It's just there. And then we can select somewhere on this axis, and without pressing anything else, if you click it, you can actually see here, you can change the position along the line. You can also change the offset here, so I'm going to change that to 50% and then press space to kind of lock that in, that's now set. So then I'm going to pick the line tool, select the middle line and bring that up about 75. So let's pick that roughly there. This doesn't need to be perfect. Then I'm going to select the point tool, and with the knife, the line cut tool, which I should also be able to find up here under the Create Tools. I'm just going to pick this point here, select, drag over to the other point, and you'll see it should snap to it. So I'm just going to click that. I'm going to press space just to unlock it. I'm going to go on the other side and do the same thing. Okay, there we go. So that's kind of our basic shape for our tool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the volume builder and mesher to bring all this together. It's how we're going to do this kind of milk effect and the orange juice effect, and how we want to make it look like it's kind of almost been sculpted, rather than, we're not going for a realistic looking carton, we're going for something that looks a bit more stylized. So what we'll do is, with that selected, I'm actually going to copy and duplicate this object. And with the polygon tool, I'm just going to select those two triangles that we've created, and I'm going to go select, invert, get rid of everything else, so we're just left with these two triangles. So I'll select these two, and then I'm going to extrude. So my extrude tool, I've got again a shortcut here, but you should be able to find it up in the commands up here, where create command, there it is, under the create. I'm going to make sure that caps is checked, and then I'm going to extrude this outwards from the carton by about, I don't know, 50. Okay, that's cool. So this is the shape we're basically going to use to cut out our kind of like top of the carton, that little lip. Before we do that, I need to reset the see, the axis position for this is completely off because it's obviously set to the original cube. So with that, I'm going to select this axis center tool, which I have a shortcut here, but again you can find that up here under mesh, axis center, and there's the same box. I'm just going to execute that, and it's just going to center our axis to the center of our triangle. So what I want to do is go into the side view, and then I'm going to shrink this down by about 20%. So when this gets to about 80, just like that. I'm going to bring this down a little. So this is our line. So this is kind of the edge of the box where that kind of sloped roof is. I'm just going to bring the bottom of this just under that line. I'm going to go to the point tool. Then I'm going to select this top point that's closest to the carton, and then I'm going to move this about, let's say, I don't know, about 65, I think. Trying to match roughly what I did before. So that is actually going to cut our hole out of our carton. So we want it obviously to be duplicated on the other side, so I'm going to get a symmetry object here, throw that cutout into there, and we'll call this one cutouts, if I can spell it right. And then we want the mirror plane, oh actually it was correct to begin with, so ZY plane. So you see now we've just got that cutting out on either side. So what we'll do is we'll bring in that volume builder and mesher, put those together, throw those objects in there. Now we'll set the voxel size to 2, and then the cutouts here we'll say subtract. So let's cut those out. We'll also add a smooth layer in. So now you see we've got that nice kind of smooth cutout out the top of the object. So now we want this kind of lip at the top, kind of the top of the carton where it's folded in. So let's create another cube, and then for this one we'll make it about, let's say, I think 40 in the Y, and in the Z like 20. Let's move that up. We just want this kind of sticking out of the top like that. We're gonna, before we actually put it into the volume builder, I'm going to make that editable, and then go to polygon mode, and then with the line cut tool, I'm just going to make a few kind of random cuts. And I just wanted to kind of make this look like not super perfect, so I just kind of offset a couple of these points, maybe something like that. So, you know, you could have it a perfect line across, but I was just trying to kind of, you know, add something that made it look a bit more kind of like it was sculpted maybe. Let's add that in at the top, and now is probably a good time to say we should probably name these objects, because otherwise it will get confused if they're all called cube. So let's just call this one main, let's call this one top. Okay, and we'll file save that. So let's create the cap hole just by bringing in a cylinder. I'm going to make this a radius of like 33 and maybe a height of 30. And then let's go into a side view. And what I want to do is bring it up to the top, kind of make it central roughly from between here and here, and then align it with this line of the carton. So let's just align that. Okay, some kind of maybe a tiny little bit that way. Okay. And then what we'll do is stick that into the volume builder, and we'll probably rename that like cap hole outer. And we'll make sure that's underneath the smooth layer. Then copy that, and we'll call this cap hole inner. And then this one will make like a radius of 23 and a height of 60. Then bring that one in, and we will go to the volume builder underneath the smoother, and we will subtract that from that. Okay, so that's kind of like the main connection, where I guess where the cardboard would connect to the cap. I had a little kind of what I guess would be like a rubber ring or something connecting between the cap and the box, so that I used just a simple torus for that. So just bring in a torus. What I'll do is just copy that cap hole inner, and I'm just going to use this so I can copy the PSR. So let's just drag the torus underneath that, and then if I do reset PSR, see it sets all the position, scale and rotation, and now we can get rid of that. And let's just scale this right down. I just want this to kind of sit above the cap, so it's just like a little cap connector, just a little bit of extra detail basically. And now let's create the cap. So let's get the outer, copy and paste that, and actually let's call this one connection, and then we'll call this cap. Bring this up. Let's make this a width of like 30 and a height of, I don't know, like 25, and then position that just above, And I'm going to use a volume builder again for this, but we're going to have these little ridges around the edge. So let's bring in a MoGraph cloner. Again, stick that under the cap, set the PSR. Is that a motorbike? Wow. I don't know if you could hear that. Motorbike interrupting. Okay, so let's position that like that. Let's bring in a capsule. Put that underneath the cloner. Now the capsule we want to be quite small, so let's make that like about 3 by 15. And we want to change the mode to radial. And then the plane, we want that to be XZ, so it's they're all sticking up, and we'll position them like that at about 28 radius, and then we'll up the count. Let's say 23. I'll bring that out. And then I'll bring in another volume builder and mesher. Put one inside the other. I'm going to put both of those underneath the cap, set the PSR so all of our position, scale and rotation is the same. So down the line I want to rotate the object. So I want the volume mesher and builder to have the same axis as the cap. So let's stick the cap and the cloner in there. And then we'll change the voxel size to something like 1. We'll add a smooth layer. And then the smooth layer, maybe we'll set that to 1. There we go. So just want kind of just the hint that there's something going on there. Okay. I mean, you could probably just change the fillet mode on here if you wanted a round edge, and then you could probably, we could get the cloner and maybe poke these out a little bit more. Then we've got a more defined sort of shape. So that's our cap and carton. Now the difference between the orange juice and the milk carton is that the orange juice has kind of an inner part cut out. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through the process for the milk carton, because we're nearly there with the modeling of that, and we can set up the animation. And then what we'll do is we'll adapt this one to create the orange juice one. So you can, this is a 2-for-1 tutorial. Okay, so let's actually put the text on the front of this object, the milk, and then we can move on with the animation. Okay, so let's bring in MoText. I'm going to rotate that around so it's pointing in the right direction through 180. And we'll obviously say milk. And let's make this maybe like a depth of 10 and a height of 60. Now I think I use the font Avenir for this, but you can use any font. I've just got this segue, so let's we could even make it let's go Arial, because everyone is Arial. Let's go for this bold one, so it's going to be slightly different to the one in my render, but it will be the same idea. It's just what fonts you have available. Let's add that on the front. Now we'll add that into our volume builder, and you see it's obviously it's not smoothing it because it's above the smooth layer, but we put it under the smooth layer, it completely obliterates it. So what I'm going to do is actually add another smooth layer above. So this smooth layer is going to affect the whole milk carton plus the milk. So I'm going to turn this down to like 1, because I just want to bring more detail in here, and then I'm going to change the strength of that layer to like 50. So let's see what that leaves. See, that leaves us with that, the detail there, or just enough detail. What I wanted this kind of sculpted look. There you go. So we've got that sticking out of our object, and it's added a little bit more smoothing to the overall. So now that's done, we can work on the animation. Right, let's just rename these objects before we animate. So let's just call this carton, and we'll call this cap. Okay. And now we can actually start animating. So I use a similar technique as I did for my number 7 tutorial for 36 days of type, using a formula basically and running the formula through the object. So let's bring in a formula and let's change the settings on that. So with our formula selected, you can see it's hidden behind the carton at the minute, but that's what it looks like. We'll just make sure it's set in 0 in the position. Actually, let's hide everything else so you can see what's going on. Let's set the X to 200, so that's kind of the width of the formula. The Y, we want to change that to something very smooth, like a 25, so we've got this like low profile smooth curve. The T min I'm going to change to 0, and then the T max 8, so I'm having 8 curves basically. And then samples, I'm going to up that to 200, so now we've got this nice smooth curve. And we'll get a rectangle from up here, and I'm going to make this, let's say we'll make the width, we'll make this up 300 by 300, and we're going to get a sweep, and then we're going to stick both the rectangle and the formula in the sweep, and now we've got this big curve object. Actually, maybe if I ruin that a little bit, shall we make that 200? Yes, okay, 200 by 300, and then we've got that nice smooth curve. Now let's call that wave, and then my initial position, let's have a look from the front and turn all of our other items back on again. Our initial position I'm going to set a bit lower. I'm going to set it to -40, so we're not too close to the copy there, and the X I'm going to say -200. So that's our initial start position. So I'm going to go to coordinates and set a keyframe on the X. Oh, and I actually need to change my project settings. So let's go to project settings. We want to be 25 frames per second. I want this to be 100 frames, so a 4-second loop. So let's go back to our wave. On frame 100, we're going to change this to -1000. Set a keyframe. So now we've got this moving through the milk, but we've got kind of an ease in and out at the moment. So let's go to the timeline, select the wave, and we can change that to linear keyframes. So it will just have a constant movement to it. Okay, so our first frame and last frame match up, so that's cool. And now what we want to do to create that milk at the bottom, we're going to select the carton, duplicate it. Let's call this one milk. And we're going to delete out of the milk all of the items that we don't need. Okay, so let's just hide the carton. We don't need the mo text. We don't need the cutouts at the top, the whole outer, or that top. We just need like the main shape. So we're going to drag in the wave to that, and then we'll keep both of those smoothings on at the moment. Let's change the setting to intersect. So now we've got this intersection between the main and the wave. Now you see it's running quite slow because it's having to calculate it every frame. And now you can get around the slowness of it by maybe changing the voxel size to a higher size. At least you can see the movement, but really we can set that to 2. The way we can get away with this is because we know, without the volume builder and mesher on, we know that this animation loops. So we're not kind of like going to be rendering in the dark. We know exactly what we're dealing with. So that's our base. And now we probably want to copy that wave again. And then on our carton, we want to add it in here. At the top, probably let's put it underneath the Motec, so it's affected by the same smoothing as the milk one, but we are going to subtract. So now we've got our top and our bottom, and because it's basically the same animation, they're running perfectly together. But as you see, it is quite slow, right? It's quite slow in updating. But as long as we know the animation's right, we can just set the computer to render that. And leave it for a few hours and go and have tea and watch some TV. So that's that. And then the only other addition I had on the milk was these kind of droplets at the bottom where it was kind of like leaking. So all that was some cylinders that I made about, I don't know, 20 high. Added some fillet to them. I've kind of changed the scale here. We'll keep it at like 20. And then we'll kind of line these up. This is where my machine is dragging. So let's maybe put one here. What I'll do is kind of get the kind of positioning that I want. So, and this is just to taste what you think is interesting. I just kind of had one on this side. Turn off the Y, and then I can move it around on the X and Z. We'll put one over here. Let's scale that down a little. And then I think I had one here, and I think maybe one over here. I can't exactly remember. Oh, actually, maybe a little bit smaller. You know, just to kind of get this kind of like puddle effect. And then we can stick all of that into the carton. Let's put it, where do we want to put it? Let's put it down here. And look in our hierarchy here where we want to attach it. So we want it to have all that smoothing on. Let's put it down here so it's affected by all the smoothing. Okay, so what it's doing is it's obviously trying to intersect, and our object is, or it's subtracting. We don't want it to, oh, that's good. You know why? Because I've put it in the wrong thing. Take it out of the carton. We want it in the milk. So but I can see whether we're going to run into a problem. So we'll put that into the milk. Oh no, actually we can leave it here. Yeah. Let's put it above the wave so it's not being affected by the wave. And then we've got our milk drips, and I had actually added onto those. We go to the vibrate tag, add that onto all of them. Had a slight bit of movement. I turned on regular pulse, enabled scale, and changed this to like 0.25, and then amplitude maybe like 1.1. I don't want to change it in the Y, so I'll leave it at 1, and 1.1 in the, so X and Z. So just the width of it we want to change the size of. Now this is going to be slow if I play it back in here, so let's just take it back out of the milk. And actually let's just turn everything else off, because I just want to see how this is moving. Yeah, see it's slow, so let's just turn all that off so it's not trying to calculate those objects. We just want to kind of see what this is looking like. So you see it's like the scaling up and down. Might want it even less than that, maybe like 1.05, 1.05. And then I would probably offset them. So maybe this one actually, we might make that 0.95, 0.95. You know, so we've just got this slight difference. Let's maybe change this one as well to 0.95, 0.95. So now we've got this kind of slight vibration to the milk puddle. So it looks like they're kind of reacting to the milk that's above in some way. Right. So with that being said, let's turn everything else back on again. Stick our cylinders back into the volume builder underneath the smoothing. So we've got our final setup. Just make sure everything's turned on. Give it a second. There we go. So that is our milk setup. So we can probably put the stage in. Actually, let's put the stage in because the stage is in both setups. Let's just bring in a plane. We'll make the plane, you know, reasonably big. We'll add in a bend under the plane. Change the strength to 90. And then we'll rotate this through -90. Actually, we'll rotate it this way. I'm going to need to zoom out and see what's going on. Yeah, that's right. Maybe we'll make that bigger. So we've got this kind of infinity curve sitting behind. I'm going to probably up the segments. Let's change this to like, I don't know, 50 by 50. Let's go into a side view. No, wrong view. Side view. See that volume builder is caching. And then let's just position that. Right, so it's just in the plane. Let's just hide that bend. And then I'm going to set the render output. So for Instagram, I usually do like 1000 by 1250. We want 25 frames per second when we render. We're going to render not all frames. We're going to render to frame 99 because 100 and frame 0 will be exactly the same. So that's our setup. I'll bring in a camera. I'm going to set it to tele. And then set the angle. I don't know. Let's set something we like. So that is the setup for the milk carton. I will save that. And what I'll show you now is how we'll adapt this milk carton into the orange carton, which was made of glass and has the orange on the inside. So that's pretty quick to do. And then we'll go through the materials for the milk and the materials for the orange. So what we'll first do is we will get rid of the milk. Actually, no, let's save this because that would make sense. And we'll call this orange. And we know the original one is for the milk. So we will delete the milk. And then in the carton, I'm going to just take that wave out and hide it. And cap and everything else is the same. Obviously, milk, we're going to do a quick change. We're going to call this OJ. Let's just make sure that's off and then set centered roughly. Actually, I called it juice, didn't I? Not OJ. Say juice. Scale that down a little. Okay. And then what we'll do is go into this view, and we're gonna need to create like an interior to the to this carton, because at the moment it's just one solid object. So let's get the main and duplicate that, and all we're going to do is scale this down. So let's scale it. So I've just got like this kind of thick edge around it. I'm going to go to the point mode. Then I'm going to select these 2 points. Now remember, we made cuts here and here, so we can get the scale tool and we can just bring these in. So I'm just going to do this roughly so it kind of lines up with those cutouts that we've got, because we don't want it to intersect. And then we'll bring these up. So you see now we've created this kind of internal structure. Let's look on this side view. Yeah, this internal structure. If we turn on the volume builder and the mesher again, it doesn't look any different from the outside, which is good. But if we go to the interior view, we should see that we've actually got a cutout now. Oh, we can't see it because I haven't actually put it inside. So what we need to do is bring that into the volume builder, and then we'll stick that under all of the smoothing, and we'll say subtract. So we're just going to cut out. There we go. So now see, we've got this interior shape to the object. It's not intersecting with these parts. We want to make sure that this hole is intersecting the hole we created earlier. See, so we've got this hole going through. So it's kind of like it's a real object, but it's, you know, we're going to make it out of glass. So let's go to our front view, and this is super simple for our modeling. So we've got our carton. Now we're going to copy that carton, and we're going to call this one juice. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete everything apart from our new main, which, you know, is our interior, basically that interior version of main. Oh, delete everything. So that's our interior. And then we're going to drag this wave in, put that under the smoothing, and we're going to say intersect. Now we don't see anything because it's obviously inside, so if we hide the carton we can see there's our juice, but we know our juice totally lines up with the interior of our object. Now when we come to put the material on, we might need to tweak that shape a little bit to make sure we haven't got any weird intersections or it's not intersecting enough, but we'll look at that next. What we'll do is, that's the setup for the orange juice, so now we will take a look at the materials for milk and then for the orange juice. So now we're back with the milk, so we'll set up the lighting and the overall look for this, set up the materials, and then I think we'll use the same setup but we'll adjust it to make our juice version. So let's start off by bringing in actually the Octane Live Viewer window. Let's drag that over, we'll set that to path tracing, press the render button. Now I've got it locked off and set to 0.5, so I've got it fully in view and I can move it around. I can zoom in if I need to. The first thing we'll do is bring in a HDRI environment, and I have an image in this tutorial set up where this room HDRI. Now I've put a link below to some free resources for, that's another bike, yeah, it must be the same guy. I've put a link below to some HDRI maps, free resources that are available, so please take a look at those if you need any of those. But that's our kind of start off for the lighting. I'm going to set the power to 2, and let's first create our first material. So let's create a diffuse material for the background. We'll call this stage, and go to diffuse, and I've written down the colors that I use. So what are we looking at? So 65, this is in HSV, and 95. So I've kind of got this slightly orangey red. I'm going to add that to the plane. What I might actually do is, I can hear my computer whizzing because it's trying to work out all of these samples. We don't need that many. I'm going to set that to 500, 10, 10. I'll probably set this to 1. Let's put on adaptive sampling as well, that'll help with rendering. And we'll save. So that's our background color, and actually we're using the same color for the main part of the milk. So let's copy that and we'll call this Carton. And this one I'm going to make a glossy material. I'll add that onto our Carton, and I will it's exactly the same color, so we're just going to add some roughness on. So I'm going to go to the node editor. We'll bring in an image texture, and we'll take that actually, and then I'm going to get a gradient. So let's take our image texture into the gradient into the roughness, and let's grab an image. I have this stucco texture, but just you can find a grunge map online. And with the gradient, as you know, we can solo just that object. Let's maybe make this, I'll just do it here, we'll just make this cubic instead of UV mapping, something like that. And let's just make this more contrasted. We'll just bring this down, and we will disable the solo mode. So I've just kind of got a bit of roughness in there, but also a bit of the like shininess. And what I might do is add in a light to kind of highlight that a little bit. So let's bring in, with nothing selected, let's go to objects, lights, targeted area light. I'm going to kind of make this kind of a thin light, and then I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to kind of put it slightly behind, just so it kind of picks up some of the kind of highlights, the differences between the shininess and the dull. So let's bring this over here, maybe make this longer. There we go. So see, we're now picking up that on the side. Maybe it's a bit too, let's maybe make here. Now see that this shadow is kind of sort of semi-hard. You can make, if you make the light bigger, you see it makes the light softer. The smaller the light is, it'll make it harder, like a harder line, but I don't mind that. Maybe I'll move it over here somewhere. there you go, something like that I'm happy with. Let's save that, and let's create our this cap. I can't remember whether I made this red or white. We'll make that the same color as the cap. So let's create another diffuse material, and we'll call this cap. And all this is just like an off-white color. So I think just kind of a yellowy off-white, so it's not super bright white. And obviously we want to make sure that the whitest thing is in our scene is the milk. So let's add that onto the cap. And I'll put that on that kind of connection as well. So that's those two parts. And then now let's do this milk material. And what I'll do is actually take this up to 1 so we can have a look at what we're looking at. We're going to create a specular material. Call this milk. Now I think I'd kind of set this up basically in the medium tab. I think in editor, no, common, we'll turn on fake shadows just to help with processing power a little bit. And under medium, let's turn on scattering. We want a scattering medium. Let's add this onto the milk so we can see what it's looking like. It kind of looks like oil at the moment. So we're going to change the settings here. So I'm going to change the density to about 25. We're going to change the absorption. We're going to bring in an RGB spectrum. Actually, it'd probably be easier to do this in the node editor. And I'll shift this around so we can see what each thing is doing. Okay. Okay, so we've got an RGB spectrum there, and this I'm going to make under HCV, and this under HSV I'm going to change the color to 49 to 100. So it's just kind of got this slightly yellowy off-white, as you can see. I mean, we're kind of in honey territory there. So what we want to do is add in some scattering. So let's add in another, let's just copy this spectrum, and we're going to bring this into scattering. And then the color of this, we're going to make kind of a slightly off blue, because I'm sure I read somewhere that milk, if you look at milk, it's got a slight blue tint to it, reflects in the light. I'm not too sure. I kind of read it, followed it, and thought, yeah, actually that doesn't look bad. So let's change the settings on here to 230, 5 and 100. So it's got this slight blue that we're bringing up, but you'll see it's still quite dark. So what I'm going to do is add in an emission. So we're going to add in a you can do a black body or a texture emission. I'm going to add in a black body here and pump that into our object. Wow, makes it super bright. It's obviously far too bright, so let's just take the power of that down to something like 10. Yeah, and oh, I think that's it. Okay, so that's all we did for that. That's basically the milk setup. So we've got this slightly transparent surface to it, and this kind of nice shiny look to it. But it's kind of a stylized version of milk. That's what we're going for. We're not going for reality, but we're trying to go for just basically what looks pretty. That's what I'm after in this. So that is basically the setup for this object. I haven't put on a Octane tag. Let's put on an Octane camera tag, and then in here we could enable the camera imager, and then we could change the response, which I think I did in my final render. So we can go through these different responses, and you can see they're kind of like lookup tables like you'd have in After Effects or Premiere. They just change the overall look and color of your object. And I think actually this one, Agfa Color Optima 2 200 CD, is actually the one that I went with for this render. We've got these nice little highlights picking up from our roughness. So yeah, that is basically this one done, and it looks pretty similar to what I did in my or exactly the same as what I did in my render. So now we can take the same scene and we're going to create the orange one. So let's just say File, Save. Okay, so here we are back to the juice model that we set up, that juice animation, and I've brought in the same items from the milk setup. So I've got the same light, the Octane sky. The only thing I realized I did wrong was previously I turned up the power within the image. I actually want that set to 1 and the power here set to 2, so just on the top level of the HDR environment tag. Okay, I brought in the materials that we just created because we're going to use these as the basis of the materials for the juice. Okay, so first off, let's change the stage color, because this one's all kind of orange based. So we're going to change this to where is it? Okay, 27, 65, 95. So I've been through and just written down the colors that I use so that you can match them, but obviously you can, you know, riff on this however you want and create your own. If you find while you've been building this that your computer's struggling with the voxel amounts because it's having to do this animation, you will find in the viewport it is difficult, but your machine might be able to handle it in the rendering. What you could do is possibly, you know, up this voxel size a bit, maybe down the smoothing, and just kind of tweak it to, you know, get where you want. The reason I've had to put the voxel size down some more is because I want to get this juice or the milk copy on the front to kind of stand out. So a way around it is if you drop that off and just went with the main object, then, you know, you wouldn't have to kind of have a voxel size as low. You could make it higher. Okay, so that's that. So let's now create the cap. So I'm going to use what I used for the carton before. I'm going to use that for the cap. So let's change the color of that. Similarly, an orange, so 65, 95. So that's the colors for that. And let's drag that onto the cap, and we'll also drag it onto that connection. Now for the juice carton on this one, it's made of glass, so we're going to actually create a specular material. I'm going to drag that onto the carton, and we're going to see there's a couple of errors we've got going on already with this material, with this intersection. Okay, I'm going to update the material with the glass, but what we'll do first is we're just going to fix what's going on here, because this inner is you know, this inner intersection is basically the same, exact same size as the inner cutout of the carton. They're sitting on the same exact pixel, and it's just not liking it. And a way of making this look nicer when you've got like a liquid in a glass is just to make the interior just a little bit bigger than the thickness. So what we're going to do is just scale up that interior just a tiny amount so it's intersecting, and now we've got that material actually, you know, kind of reflecting within the glass here, and it just suddenly looks a lot nicer. So we'll update that material in a minute, but what we'll do first for the juice, what we'll do first is update this glass. So let's just call this glass, and we're just going to change a couple of things on here. We're just going to up the index to like 1.4, so it gives us a few more reflections. And under medium, we're going to add, I think it's, what do we want to add? Yeah, an absorption. And we're going to make this very low. We're going to say like 0.5. And we just want to bring in a tiny amount of color. So we're just going to go to plugins, RGB spectrum, and we're going to add a little tiny amount of blue, like just a hint of blue. Maybe that's even too much. Just like that much. I've just got a little tiny bit of blue in there. And now we're going to update this material, and what we're going to use for that is actually the milk. So I'm just save this. Let's bring the milk onto the juice, and we're going to rename this juice now. And again, you know, I haven't kind of tried to see what the refraction setting should be for juice. I've just kind of gone with what I think looks nice, basically. So we're going to keep the same settings as we did with the milk. We're just going to update these, the absorption and scattering and the emission. So let's change these colors in here to something that's more suitable for orange juice. So I'm going to change this to 35, 94 and 100. So we've got this bright orange. And then in the scattering, we're going to change that color to 50, 66 and 100. So we've got this like yellow. And then obviously this is looking very dull and dark, so we can actually amend this emission, and we're going to add an RGB spectrum in here so we can actually have an emission that's an orange color. So let's add RGB spectrum. You see, this looks like it's containing some sort of volatile liquid. Let's change that to 32 and 100 and 100, so we're just having a bright orange. And the power on that, we're going to turn that right down to say like 3. Now I could probably tweak this orange just a little bit more, because I probably haven't got the exact same setup as my render, so I might want to tweak, say, like the emission. Maybe want to up the brightness a tiny amount. We could change the absorption color. And this one, take this down a little bit. Maybe go back to the black body. Okay, until we get something we like. And then I'm not too keen on this. See this kind of red reflection at the bottom here. So what we could probably do is just grab that whole juice and just move it down. I just want to get it to a point so it just looks nicer in the render, basically. Not too fussed about what is actually real. Just want to do what looks nice. And then, you know, the reflections you've got in here, you've got these little dark bits. That's from the sky. You could rotate that around to try and move those. Oh, it's probably actually like internal refractions. So let's go to the glass. Maybe we could play around with index. See if we turn up the index, we get more of the white reflections. I'm going to leave it at 0.4, but you can play around, but that's the basic setup. So I think that just about wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.